This is the flag of New Zealand. But did you know that New Zealand throughout its history also had another flag? So in today's video, as you might have guessed, what happened to New Zealand's old flag? Well, let's look a bit at New Zealand's history, and to find out about the New Zealand flag, let's first look at the Maori people. Now, in the Maori language, the New Zealand flag is called Te Haki o Aotearoa. The ancestors of the Maori were the first people to come to New Zealand, probably somewhere around 1300, and they are the descendants of today's Maori, and they're still around and still making flags, and so really the first people to make flags in New Zealand were the Maori. However, the first Europeans to arrive in New Zealand had somewhat different flags, and they came in 1642 and... okay. But wait a minute, the guy who found it was Abel Tasman, and wasn't he a Frisian? So should we play the Frisian music? The Dutch didn't really do much in New Zealand, apart from maybe make the coolest flightless bird after the penguin extinct, so good job, I guess. But instead of the Dutch, the British would be more interested in New Zealand, and they would found the New Zealand Company with aspirations to settle on the islands of what is today New Zealand. Now when they arrived, as I said, the Maori people were already making a type of flags that were called Kaitaka, and these types of flags were mostly made of cloth and incorporated traditional designs on them. Now, there was an important meeting between the Maori people and the British in 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi. And in this treaty, the Maori were given the right to become British citizens, partially out of fears of French expansion, but also the desire of the British to expand over the islands too. And as we can see here, the Union Jack is the most important flag that is being represented. So the Union Jack is an important early flag of the first European settlers in New Zealand, even though they would soon be at odds with several of the Maori tribes and there would be violence between them. Actually, a little earlier than the Treaty of Waitangi, you had in 1834 another meeting at the same site where many of the tribes of New Zealand came together to form the United Tribes of New Zealand, and with this flag. And as you can see, this flag takes some of its symbolism from several British flags like the St. George's Cross, as well as some of the colours of the British flag, although this was incorporated into a design that was meant to represent the United Tribes of New Zealand, so the Maori people. I'll have a separate video on the Maori flags of New Zealand in the future. If you're interested, let me know in the comments below and I can bump that up the list of videos that I have coming. Now, this would, however, the situation change in 1863, and this was as part of a British-led invasion of the Maori territory of Waikato. And this was, during this time, the British needed ships from which they could unload their troops and supplies onto the North Island to fight against the Maori. And this is where the Blue Ensign comes in. This is the Blue Ensign, so it's a dark blue flag with a Union flag in the canton, so in the corner position. And this flag was used by the Royal Navy to signal its own ships. And so the British, when they were commandeering vessels around New Zealand for their operations against the Maori, made sure that they all flew this design, the Blue Ensign, to show that they were part of the British fleet to go and attack the Maori. Now in 1867, the New Zealand colony decided that it was a good idea to have an emblem, something that would show that ships were not just from anywhere in the British Empire that was using the Blue Ensign, but specifically from New Zealand. And that's when they decided very creatively to put the letters NZ for New Zealand in the corner. However, they decided in 1869 that this wasn't too creative, and for the first time we see the forerunner of the modern New Zealand flag, which of course has the 4 red stars with white borders added to the design to make it the New Zealand special flag. And this in 1902 was confirmed as the official design of the New Zealand colony. As many of you will probably know, the stars on the flag aren't just arranged in a random pattern. They're actually named after the Southern Cross, which is one of the most important constellations that can be seen in the southern hemisphere in the sky at night. And it appears actually on many flags. These are just some of them. So we have obviously Australia, Brazil, Samoa, and on the flag of Papua New Guinea, we can all see the Southern Cross appearing there. Now, it obviously also is on the flag of New Zealand, and that explains basically the history behind New Zealand's flag. But then that's the Blue Ensign flag. But then what about this other flag that I mentioned at the start of the video with the red background? Well, let's take a look at that now. So we have the Blue Ensign, which obviously is the British flag on a blue background, so it's the Blue Ensign. It may not surprise you to know that the red design is then called the Red Ensign. And apparently my voice is just broken, so I'm going to clear my throat and continue the video. So the Red Ensign, also called the Red Duster in New Zealand contexts, is a similar idea to the Blue Ensign. But remember that the Blue Ensign was the flag that was used by British Royal Navy ships. Now, the Red Ensign on the other side is the flag that is used by British merchant ships or civil ships. And so, similar to what we saw in 1869 with the Blue Ensign getting the Southern Cross added in New Zealand, we also see in 1901 that they also added on this design of the stars, and so it became a sort of semi-official flag of New Zealand that was used by merchant ships. So for example, during both world wars, the vast majority of New Zealand's merchantmen and merchant ships were flying the Red Duster as their flag at the back of the ship. Now this has led to some confusion because some in New Zealand see this as a sort of quasi-official flag, and that has led to its use of the flag on land, sometimes beside the official New Zealand flag, so the design based on the Blue Ensign. But technically in flag protocol that isn't correct, because this is a flag that is only meant to be flown on the sea rather than on land. However, what's interesting, and that was confirmed in 1903, what's interesting though is that the New Zealand government made a slight change to that law, that protocol, in 1981, and that's because in the Maori culture the colour red is seen as being incredibly important, and red had always been favoured on the flags of the Maori themselves, and so the Maori have special dispensation to also fly the Red Duster on land because of that cultural connection with the colour red. And so that's one of the flags that you will apparently often see at Maori gatherings, as well as several other Maori flags and the official flag of New Zealand. So that's the story of New Zealand's flag and of the Red Duster or the Red Ensign. Now what's interesting is that you'll also find such a distinction, for example, in Australia, where you have the Australian flag and then basically a carbon copy of the constellation and the extra star added on in the same pattern. So you also have an Australian Red Duster, and several other British colonies or former British colonies also have such flags with red and blue designs. But that is the end of this video for today. Let me know in the comments below, would you like to see a video about the specifically Maori flags in New Zealand and the design behind them? And I also have a video planned on whatever happened to the new flag of New Zealand, because for a very long time there has been talk in New Zealand of scrapping the flag based on the Blue Ensign and having a completely different flag instead, partially to better represent the various indigenous populations of New Zealand, so the largest being the Maori, as well as a few others on the islands, for example, and some to get away from the colonial past with connections to the British. But I heard the largest reason was mostly because people often confuse their flag with the flag of Australia, which at first sight looks very similar, but can be told apart. Number one, because there are no red borders around the stars on the Australian flag, and there is an extra star, a huge star, which I only just noticed when I made this video. So there we go, we're all learning. It's a great time. Anyway, I've been Hilbert. I've been in a weird mood whilst making this video, so I hope it's been fun. Let me know in the comments below, and see you all very soon. Take care.